Hey y'all, Connor here from Kamerastore.com, back with a longer review of the Rollei 35 AF. We had our first impressions video where Nico and I talked about our first experiences with the camera, just the first couple days. Now I've had a little bit more time to shoot some rolls. I shot like 2.5 rolls, sit with the camera, hold it, play with it, and see how I feel. So we're gonna dive right in and talk about what this camera is. So this is a joint production between Mint and Rollei. So Mint has produced a bunch of cameras on their own, a lot of instant stuff, a lot of Polaroid accessories. And Rollei has a history spanning back almost 100 years, making TLRs, SLRs, all kinds of stuff, including the original Rollei 35, which is a fully mechanical viewfinder camera with a not detachable, collapsible. The original Rollei 35 has a collapsible lens and was fully mechanical, and then they came out with this, which uses a lot of the design styling of the older camera, but with a lot of modern technology and a more traditional point and shoot experience. So this is a fully autofocus camera. It has autofocus down to 0.7 meters. It has aperture priority auto exposure as well as manual control, which is pretty cool for a camera like this. A 35mm f2.8 lens. It's just a Rollei lens, no Carl Zeiss involvement like on the original Rollei 35. It has an OLED screen. It's got DX coding, manual ISO control as well, manual advance and rewind, which is something that is important to a lot of people for that sort of classic feel, and LiDAR focusing, which isn't that much of a game changer. It's available on things like the iPhone and some other cameras as well, but it's a method of autofocus. This may be the first time it's ever been used in a film camera, so that's pretty cool. We're gonna walk around. We're in our lovely harbor here in Tampere, take some pictures, and discuss my experiences with the Rollei 35 AF. So let's get going. We came to a slightly shadier location for me to load the film and also talk about the loading. With a camera like this that's taking very clear inspiration from a previous camera, it sort of invites comparison. The older Rollei 35 is notoriously finicky to load. You have to take the whole back off, and then there's a flap that you have to do. It's kind of a pain, and they've decided to keep it almost exactly the same on this new model. So you see I just slid the whole back off, and then there's a flap here instead of a more traditional hinge design, which is pretty universal, and I definitely would have preferred it. It's just a little bit difficult, and we're loading Santa Color 100, available on Kamerastore.com. Once you get used to it, it's not so bad. I will say this small hole here that the top of the film canister goes into is very tight, so we've had some issues loading some weirder films, hand-spooled films, basically film that's coming in non-standard canisters. We use Kodak and Fuji canisters for Santa film, so it fits, but some other third-party films might not. But yeah, you just sort of slide it in there and the film pulls across. You've got this pressure plate here and the back slides back on. And this is where it is a little finicky. And you can see it's just tough to get it in on both sides. There you go. And you gotta kind of push it. I'm not exaggerating. I think that this is a little bit difficult. If you're a Rollei 35 purist, you're used to this system, you know what it's like, but compared to something a little bit more modern, like a lot of the point and shoots that we're seeing in the 90s and the 80s and even into the 2000s, this is more difficult and more things you have to keep track of. Could they have done it a newer way? Probably. I don't know why they did it the older way, except to keep it similar to the old Rollei. So whether you like it or not is up to you. I think it's a little cumbersome. But let's get going. We'll take some pictures. Included in the box is this lovely leather strap. I don't know if it's synthetic or real leather, but feels nice, smells nice, I like it. Not included is any adapter for using filters, so no filters with the Rollei 35 AF. So the first thing I noticed, and probably the first thing that you'll notice if you buy one of these, is the shutter button. This button is weird. It takes quite a bit of force to press all the way in. So you see you get the standard half press autofocus kind of thing. Autofocus is a bit loud, but it's not so bad. So you fire the shutter and I'll take another picture. And you see, it didn't even do it. So I've been having issues with this. Basically this whole roll. There we go. And this is what I wanted to talk about. It stays in, which is weird, because I don't know any other cameras that do that. So it doesn't feel very good. And then it pops back out when you advance the film, which is, it's functional for the most part. I only started having issues now, but I'm only 3 rolls in, so that's not very much either. The Rollei 35 AF uses LiDAR for autofocus. In practice, it's pretty much the same as a lot of different point and shoots. I find that it thinks for a second and then is very confident. So I haven't had any issues where it's been hunting or having trouble finding focus. Even in the dark, the LiDAR's been pretty good and I think pretty accurate as well. Like I said earlier, the autofocus motor is very loud. It's very 80s sounding, which, you know, I don't mind it, but if you're used to something like a point and shoot from the 2000s, or even the new Pentax 17, which does have a focus motor, it's so quiet that you might not even notice. This is definitely very noticeable, so. Yeah, but pretty fast, pretty accurate, so thumbs up for that. Another major positive of the new Rollei 35 AF is fully manual exposure, which is something that's pretty rare in an autofocus compact with this 35mm 2.8 lens. Those are very popular features, but being able to choose your shutter speed and your aperture is pretty unique, and it gives you, in a point and shoot, sort of unprecedented levels of control. I can't think off the top of my head of another point and shoot that gives you physical dials for both shutter speed and aperture. It's really nice, and I actually found it very useful, especially in low light situations where I want to lock the shutter speed to something usable and then play with the aperture to get sort of my best creative choice. And you get a little meter readout on this tiny OLED screen here. It would be incredible to have it in the viewfinder, but this OLED is pretty useful. It also functions as your ISO selector and your frame counter. So you get a little plus and minus thing in manual mode to tell you if you're over, underexposed, or good. It works pretty well. It's pretty small, but it's an OLED screen, so even in this bright sun that's coming at me, I can still read it, which is great. If you're familiar with the original Rollei 35, this is noticeably bigger if you hold them next to each other. If you don't, it's not that noticeable. I think this is a pretty good size for a point and shoot. Fits in a bag nicely. It is very brick-like, but again, that's owing to that Rollei 35 design heritage. So, it's a very stylish camera in general. The fonts are nice, the colors are good. This paint, this silver paint, is pretty thin on top of the metal. It is metal. You can see we've got some scratches already on ours. That's just from a few weeks of handling the camera, so I assume that'll happen as well. It's available in silver and black. The black is really handsome. The silver is nice too, but that black is really, really sweet. So you get your choice. Speaking of the physical control dials, we also have these purely cosmetic. There's a film type indicator, so color slide, color negative, or black and white, and then a notifier of how many exposures your roll of film has. This is obviously a throwback to the older Rollei, which had both these dials as well. These don't do anything. They are a little plasticky, and this exposure one, for example, is already loose. It sits right under your finger, so you do touch it quite a lot. So that's why this one's loose and this one isn't. It's fine, it's cute, just something of note. But yeah, they don't actually do anything. One more thing of note is the advance lever and the rewind lever as well, but mostly this advance lever. It is stiff and a little grindy and ratchety and not very smooth. I also found the rewind lever to be very stiff compared to a lot of other cameras. It's a bit of a shame because the build quality on this is pretty good in general, but these things the film advance, the shutter, these things that you're really interacting with all the time don't feel so great. So even if this part of the camera feels great, the stuff that you're actually handling is a little lacking, I would say. I'd like to see them do it a little bit better in the next one. So that's just a bit of info about the new Rollei 35 AF, how it works, the different functions of it, how my experience has been with it. Let's get the film out of the camera, process a few rolls, and look at some photos. I'll see you inside. Hey, it's been a couple weeks since what you just saw when we were out shooting the Rollei 35 AF. We've taken the time to develop the photos, shoot a couple more rolls. I gave the camera to a few other people in the office, scan, digitize, process, and now we're here to take a look at the photos. So we're going to do that first. I have a few here, some curated photos, and then some conclusions, and we'll talk about, you know, how does this camera fit into the market? Who do I think it's for? That kind of stuff at the end. So let's get right to it. So we're looking at a picture that I took right at the end of the last segment, sort of down this man-made river in our Ranta Tampella neighborhood. And I think that the sharpness I would describe as good. It's a 35mm 2.8 lens with Santa color film. I think that the details are pretty good. It's relatively sharp, at least the center is definitely a little bit sharper than the edges, but not noticeably. It's really not such a big deal. One thing that we noticed consistently are these they look like hairs at the edge of the frame. This is on both of our copies. We had 2 review copies. So these hairs are part of the camera. They're part of the sort of light seals that are inside the where a mirror would be on an SLR, but inside that little area there. It only really shows up if you're scanning with borders. At first we thought it was a pre-production issue, but this one is a production camera and it has the same thing. So something that you'll notice, but not something that's particularly hard to get around. I mean, you can just crop it in. So yeah, let's look at the next photo here. And again, I mean, I think this is maybe a little bit shaky because of me, but the color rendition is very good, and Santa color can be sometimes a bit of a difficult film to expose. It, yeah, has very strong colors at times. I think it looks pretty neutral and pretty good. And you can see there is some very good details. I think it's I can zoom in a little bit more so that it starts to be a little bit less sharp. But I think for what we're dealing with a point and shoot like this, that's the kind of sharpness that you're gonna get. It's not a world-beating lens, but it is totally adequate. It is totally good. I know Mint has made some good lenses before. I don't know how much of a hand Rollei had in designing this lens or who designed it. There are rumors, but you know, we don't know. But yeah, I think they did a great job. It's a really great first effort, especially. I'd love to see where they go developing this sort of thing a little bit further. But yeah, we'll just keep going through, and there's some great colors here. This is, I think, a good testament to the metering. It's, I assume, full for like metering from the entire frame, but you get a pretty good highlight area in the top and then some deep shadows as well, and there's still a good amount of detail in both sections, so that's really nice. Even though you do have manual controls, which I would say is one of the biggest pros of this camera, being able to trust that automatic exposure system is important and necessary, I would say. I think in this photo, they are still present, those hairs at the edge of the frame, but here they're very difficult to notice, so it might depend on your settings and even the focus, if that's picked up. So just something to keep in mind as you're shooting. This is a really nice one. I think Tu almost took this because I would remember taking this picture. It's really beautiful. I think it's a good show of the lens not really distorting very much. There's a lot of very straight vertical lines in this picture. So if the lens was, you know, poorly made or distorted, you would notice it here. And I think we're getting, you know, impressively straight lines. Tu almost took way better photos than I did. And these were all with Santa color, Thomas?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I'm really impressed with this one too. Just the edge-to-edge sharpness here. You can see, I mean, on this edge it's quite sharp, and then on the other edge it's also quite sharp.
There might be a tiny bit of light fall off in the corners here, but it's really minor. And again, the sort of hairs at the edge are not noticeable in this frame. You can see here a bit of maybe ghosting going on in sort of the top of this these trees. It's pretty minor, and for a camera that doesn't have a lens hood, I think that's like totally acceptable. It is, like I said earlier, a bit of a shame that there's no mechanism for attaching accessories to this, such as a lens hood or filters. It would be really nice. I understand that the meter is not coming through the lens, so it would probably throw off your exposure to have at least colored filters, but it would be nice to be able to put a UV filter or a skylight or something creative like a cross screen or something like that. So here you can see a little bit of sort of how it handles direct sunlight. So a little bit of flaring going up and down, which is pretty normal. It's nothing too crazy. Pretty much what you'd expect from a similar point and shoot of the 90s or 2000s. The coatings are doing a good job of minimizing the impact of that on the photo. If this were a camera from the 60s, if this were the original Rollei 35, it would probably even be worse. So good job there. Those were the photos, or some of them, that we took with the Rollei 35. We did, I guess, altogether probably 6 or 7 rolls between 3 employees here. So we got a good chance, I think, to figure out how we feel about this camera, see the results. All of us had our own experiences. We had some things we agreed on and some things we disagreed on. But yeah, you can see the photos for yourself. I think that they're actually quite good. I was, on the whole, impressed with it. But yeah, let's start to talk about conclusions, because that's where it gets a little bit less cut and dry about how we feel about this camera. So, as I said in the previous section, what I don't like about this is the stuff you interact with. I think that the dials, the levers, the buttons don't feel very good. That's my opinion. Opinions varied with the other people that used it. We all agreed that the advanced lever isn't very good and that the shutter button isn't very good. More than just me had issues with the shutter button sort of not working all the time, getting stuck, not triggering even though it's pressed all the way in. Various issues like that. We all had issues with the frame counter going way beyond what it was supposed to go to, and I don't know what's causing that. We didn't see anything super weird with the negatives, but for example, my rolls went past 45 to 50, 55. Our cameraman Tuomas's went to 62, which is just really bizarre behavior. And I believe Nico's also went to, I think, 48. 2 different copies, 2 different cameras, so it isn't just that this one is broken in some way, unless both of the ones we received were slightly broken, which is possible. And it's a shame because the rest of it is built very well. It's very handsome. It's a great looking camera. The materials feel good. It's got a good heft to it, but yeah, the things that you're touching are not the strongest part of this camera. The lens is very good, as I said, but the actual shooting experience was a little lackluster for me, and I think that was echoed by the other people who tested the camera as well. But your mileage may vary. It may fit you perfectly. Looking back on my experience with this camera, I think that the thing that held them back the most is trying to stick to this Rollei 35 design aesthetic. I think in their efforts to emulate this older style of camera, they've brought a couple of things that we've moved past and some things that maybe aren't as nice as they could be. For example, the film loading. This advanced lever, which does not feel as good as the original, but it feels like they tried to make it ratchety on purpose even, and it ends up feeling very rough. But the film loading especially, I feel that we've moved past the whole back comes off and there's a plate and all that. I think the situation with hinge doors that we saw all through the 80s, 90s, 2000s, even today, is vastly superior. And I'm not sure why they did this other than, like I said earlier, sticking with that Rollei 35 design aesthetic. I would love to see what Mint is capable of doing without the constrictions of the Rollei 35. I think that they do have a good history of building interesting cameras with unique feature sets. And so seeing them break into the 35mm space on their own would be really interesting to me. But yeah, this has been a bit of a tough review, and we waited a long time to film this part because we weren't sure how to discuss this. Because I just don't think we had such a positive experience with it. And maybe you will. Maybe you're a Rollei 35 purist and you love that it looks like the old camera and that it has the dials like the old camera and the advanced lever like the old camera. In which case, if you like it, the pictures are great. Like, if you can get great pictures out of it, that's what a camera should do. Coming at it from the perspective of a new camera entering the market, I wish they had done things a little bit differently. So yeah, that's been a bit about our time with the Rollei 35. It's a complicated camera. If you've picked one up and you love it, that's great. Leave a comment below and tell us about your time with it. I'm really happy that they brought it to market. I think it's really cool that Rollei wants to get involved and that Mint is now has the production capability to make cameras like this. Like I said, I'm really excited to see what they do next. I'm really excited that we have multiple cameras now coming out at a very high build quality with great lenses. It's a really great thing for the community. So yeah, we'll be here shooting all the new cameras as they come out and letting you know what we think about them. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a comment below, or a question, or whatever other thoughts you have about the new Rollei or the Pentax or any other cameras. I'm Connor. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.